Hello friends, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Maivi and the purpose of this channel, at the moment at least, is to review the 9 novels nominated for the Climate Fiction Prize. I am myself an environmental expert. I'm specialized in carbon management, climate change related stuff. So what we are doing in this channel is not only reviewing the books from a literary perspective, but I also want to review the books from a climate perspective. Today we have the third book that I have read from this list, which is Briefly Very Beautiful. This is a book which I have to say I read it as a buddy read with Bob the Bookerer, and I thoroughly enjoyed that because I've been a fan of Bob for a really long time. So when he suggested for us to do this buddy read, it was very, very exciting for me, and it was fantastic also to hear his perspective as someone who has read far more books than I have. So yeah, that was very, very fun. So let's discuss what this book is about. This book is basically about a woman named Cass. It's set in a city which is unnamed, but it's probably London or another major city within the UK. It doesn't name the country either, but it seems like it takes place between England and Scotland. But all of this is unnamed. It is supposed to happen in the future. Not sure if we're talking about near term, midterm, or long-term future, but the reality is that the world is going through climate collapse, particularly the area where she is. There are wars going on around the world, and this woman has 3 children, and she's also married to this man who is a doctor. And at the moment that the novel starts, this man has left to basically go and act as a physician, as a doctor in a war zone. So she is alone in the city with the children. The city is being not only consumed by fires and completely ravaged by fires, but also there is a group of men which nowadays we know them as incels, but they kind of become eco-terrorists under these circumstances of climate collapse. And they are basically perpetrating attacks across the city, and lots of people are losing their lives through these attacks and this situation of social unrest. The whole situation is extremely dangerous, and at some point she decides to flee with her children and try to find another place that is perhaps safer than their current situation. So we can see how this is a novel that is very relevant to climate change. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of review both my literary experience and my impressions on climate change, kind of in a woven way. And I'm going to start with the positive, which is what I liked about the book. One of the things is, and in this sense, this reminded me to Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale. All the things that we see here, all the things that happen to her in the city and her experience as a climate refugee are things that are currently happening. When Margaret Atwood wrote The Handmaid's Tale, if you read the author notes, what she says is that all the atrocities that she included in that story are things that have happened. In this case, the experience that is narrated here as this woman, Cass, and her children as climate refugees is a story, unfortunately, that is common to millions of people at the moment. The way in which you are forced to make that decision, where you are in a very dangerous situation. This is not just relevant to climate, of course, but climate is one type of forced migration. I do have a video in which I go deep into this topic of climate migration, and I'm going to leave the link right here and in the description below if you want to go check that out. But yeah, I think it's a very universal story about the process of forced migration, the decision to flee, the fact that normally people that are being forcibly displaced, normally what they do is an internal type of migration, and very typically they will go and stay with people that they know, either friends or family. And sometimes it might happen that that situation also becomes unbearable, also becomes dangerous, or just unsustainable in itself, and they need to flee again. So, this kind of ongoing process where you are looking for safety until you can finally reach a place of sanctuary, that is very common to the refugee experience. And I like that this is brought in here. Another thing that I liked, I don't know if that's the right word, but this idea of incels becoming eco-terrorists. The way that is described here, I think that is hilarious and terrifying and very plausible. So, these groups of men filled with hatred. In which way are they going to react when climate change is right at their faces, and when they themselves are suffering in their own skins the consequences of climate change? I think this hypothesis is very plausible, and I like the way that that was executed. I was like, oh wow, when I read that. And the last thing that I think was very much spot on is in reference to the title of this book. Very, very early on, in the first few pages, we learn what Roz Dineen means by briefly very beautiful. And what she's talking about is that she's talking about an early stage in climate change in which a country, potentially the UK, but it's not actually being said, goes through a phase in which the weather is much warmer and in a good way still. And we see that there's kind of like an invasion of butterflies. So people are happier because the weather is a little bit nicer, and because there's more warmth in the months that used to be cold, and because the butterflies are so cute and they're everywhere. So there was this period in which things for a brief period of time were very beautiful. But then all of that gives way to chaos and collapse, basically. What I have to say is that what she describes here is a phenomena that is already happening. There are areas in this planet in which climate change is happening at a more accelerated pace. Here in the UK, we are very lucky that we live in an island. Because we live in an island, we are surrounded by water, and water has a buffer effect when it comes to climate. So even though I have heard people saying that the climate has changed compared to many years ago, still the changes in temperature are kind of become milder because of the influence of the water. There are places where that's not the case, and the changes are happening at a much more accelerated pace. I'm going to share with you my own experience because I lived it myself. And in my country, in Argentina, what she narrates here, this period of something briefly very beautiful that she narrates here, has been happening for at least 10 years, where the winters have become much warmer, the summers have become much longer, and we have ridiculous invasions of different types of insects that happen periodically. So there might be times where we have had lots of snails everywhere, absolutely everywhere, eating all the flowers and everything in people's gardens. We have had, of course, loads of mosquitoes. We have had invasions of moths, invasions of perhaps some insects that are not so known. It's apparently, in English, the name is southern green stink bug. Southern green stink bug. And the reason that it's called like that is because it stinks. If you touch it or if you kill it, it's gonna leave a horrible smell in the room that is very, very, very hard to get off. I talked about this with one of my friends, and she's from Argentina. And I would say it's a little bit naive to call this beautiful, because when you live through it, it doesn't feel beautiful. I've been in Argentina. The last 2 times that I traveled to Argentina was in the month of May, which in the South Hemisphere is kind of like the equivalent to November. I remember going to school when I was a child. I remember May as a cold month where I had my wool tights and my hat and my scarf and my jacket. These last 2 times that I went in May, I've had days of 30 degrees. Just imagine 30 degrees in November in the UK. We used to have 4 seasons. We used to have a temperate climate. Now we don't. Now it has shifted to a tropical climate. That has brought consequences such as the particular mosquito that transmits dengue disease has migrated south. So that thing that used to be Brazil's problem now is in proper central Argentina. We're talking about at least 2,000 kilometers south of where that insect used to live. So it doesn't feel beautiful when you live in it, but in this book it's quite well described. Just an FYI, what happened there in Argentina, it is going to happen here in the UK, unless we do something about it to revert climate change. Now I'm going to move on to the things that I didn't like so much about this book. The first thing is something that I would really like to discuss with someone else. So if someone in the comments wants to have a conversation about that, please let me know, because I would really like to talk about this with someone else. I don't really know where I stand. When a story is framed as a dystopia, because it's happening in a Western country or in the global north, and the story that is being narrated is a story that it is actually happening to people in other parts of the world. So what are we trying to say with that? Are we trying to say that it is only a tragedy when it happens in the global north, to countries like the UK, the US, Europe? Or are we trying to bring this message of beware that this is happening, beware that this is happening to people elsewhere in the world, and put yourself in their shoes, try to be empathetic, and by the way, you're not exempt. It can happen to you. It will happen to you. So I will be okay with it if the message is the second one. But I think somehow we need to find a way to make that clear. Because, I don't know, I mean, maybe if we make it clear, it will be kind of like spoon-feeding the message. I get that. But again, I don't know where I stand with this. So I would really like to have a conversation with someone, just, to bounce ideas and to clarify my opinion on this. The other thing I didn't like so much is the language in this book is quite plain and simple. It's not bad, but what I would say is that it's not beautiful language. It's not poetic. It's readable, but it's not beautiful. And I like a book that when I'm reading, it just gives you these amazing phrases that leaves you like, it just scratches that itch of, reading that amazing vocabulary. And this book doesn't really have that, so it's not adding that to the reading experience. Sometimes that's fine, because it's very heavily plot driven or character driven. But yeah, it's not beautiful language, which is something that I very much appreciate in a book. The other thing that I didn't like so much, and I am very sorry, this is going to be probably very controversial for me to say, is that particularly in the first part of the book, it talks so much about maternal love. It spends a lot of pages saying things like, oh, my children are so beautiful. I can't believe I love them so much. The love for them consumes me. It is the same old story. I think, I don't know, I'm very, very biased on this. I am a 40-year-old person who is child-free by choice. And I have been hearing this my entire life, people trying to kind of convince me to become a mom and describing, oh, it's the greatest love you'll ever feel. And yes, I know, I get it. And I'm not opposed to it, not at all. And I like to hear, maybe different angles of the same conversation or different perspectives of how this love manifests. But this didn't add anything at all. It was just statements and remarks on how much she loves the children. It didn't really give me anything. So I found that a little bit repetitive and didn't really enjoy that much. The other thing that I miss from this book is the children's point of view. The children are very passive in this story. We see very little of what they are feeling and what their impressions are with everything that is happening. I think that is incredibly interesting to see the point of view from children, in which, and maybe to create that juxtaposition between an adult person that had lived their entire lives or most of their lives under normal-ish circumstances, and then a crisis comes, versus the experience of a child who that's all they know. They grew up in this chaos. They were born and grew up in a state of collapse. And I think I would really have liked to see a bit more focus on that, on how they're feeling, what are their opinions, what is their point of view while they're living through this situation. We get a glimpse of their personalities, and that's all. But I really love the character of the two older children, V, which he's the 8 or 9-year-old boy, and the girl Max. I think they were fantastic, and they were the only two characters that I liked. And the last point I want to make, which is the thing that I liked the least, I want to caveat this by saying I had really high expectations of this book as a climate novel. And I really thought, and it fooled me at the beginning, I really thought it was going to focus very much on the experience of the migrant, of the refugee, of the person that has been through forced displacement. It did it at the beginning, and then it reached the border. It went through the border very fast, very fast comparing to what normally happens in situations like this. I think it was less than 24 hours. She was on the other side. And then when she crossed to the other side, the blurb says here that when she flees her home, she encounters a hostile environment. This is actually referring to a personal situation, not to a hostile nation receiving refugees. And that's the experience of refugees. They go through all that trauma, and then when they finally reach sanctuary, they are faced with hatred, with intolerance, with a different type of unsafe situation. And I think that doesn't happen here. She reaches a house, and there are problems in the house, but it's all personal. it becomes very much like a soap opera. It becomes extremely speculative. And we see pages and pages and pages of her just panicking and being paranoid and speculating with, oh, what is this person thinking? And what are this person's intentions? And if this is what they do, then this man might mean blah, blah, blah. And if that is what they say, what does that mean to me? What does it mean for our children? And it becomes like these really long internal dialogues. The last part of the book is like a fever dream where everything is chaos, but everything is happening within her head. And it's all like he said, she said. It just becomes too much. I did not enjoy that at all. So yeah, for me, unfortunately, this novel was a mess. In terms of the expectations that I had, I wondered if it wasn't a novel nominated for the Climate Fiction Prize, if I would have had a different experience. This was a disappointment, unfortunately. It had a lot of potential, but I really don't know what happened. Halfway there, we got lost. So yeah, I gave this novel 2.75 because it started as a 4, then it ended as a solid 2, and that would average it as 3. But I had some resentment because I was very disappointed, so I couldn't bring myself to score this 3. So 2.75 is the score that I gave this novel. Let me know if you feel differently. Bob enjoyed it much more than I did, I think, so you might have as well. Let me know your thoughts if you have read it or if you are planning to read it. And thank you very much for spending this time with me. I really hope to see you next time. And yes, take care. Bye bye.